Okay, so I literally just got off a meeting and turned this camera on because the meeting I just had was with a lady who's thinking of leaving Australia. She was obviously inspired by our story, and we we're talking about potential ways that she could do that. And she mentioned the reason she wants to leave Australia is because she's sick and tired of the lack of common sense in Australia. And I thought, actually, that is an amazing point, and it's the one thing I definitely don't miss about Australia is the lack of common sense. Let me explain a little bit more on why that is. So for those who don't know who I am, my name is Jimmy, and myself, my wife, and my two children live up on the Australian dream and left Australia and went traveling and have settled in Penang in Southeast Asia, and we're living our life over here. So if you want to learn more about that adventure and how we went about that, make sure to subscribe to the channel. So lack of common sense. This is something that gets brought up in the comments a lot. And obviously this lady, when I was speaking to her today, brought it up as the reason she was leaving. And it's such an interesting point because it is one of the key things about living here in Southeast Asia when compared to Australia. So lack of common sense can mean a lot of things, but to me, lack of common sense is just the direction Australia is going, especially in regards to rules and regulations. Because the thing is, Australia and the rest of the Western world is overregulated and red taped to death. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that you can't just rely on common sense to make sure a country is safe and the people in its country are safe, because unfortunately, common sense is a commodity that's found less and less. But you see it in the news all the time. Like people not being able to put a chicken coop in their backyard because it's noisy. And the neighbors complain. And because of that, someone pulls out some old bylaw that means they can't do it anymore. Common sense would say that having a chicken coop in your backyard is an overall net positive for your household and probably the households around it. Not only do you teach your kids a little bit about health, teach your kids a little bit about safety, getting some eggs and all the benefits of that. And yes, they make a little bit of noise. But common sense would say that if the chickens are making noise, you just close your door and move on with your life. And obviously that's not the best example in the world, but leave in the comments, guys, what are some things in Australia that should be just common sense that are over red taped or over regulated to death? I'd love to know because, the thing with being in Southeast Asia is that you just don't have that. Now, it is a double-edged sword because there is a lot of things that happen in Southeast Asia that accidents and things like that maybe shouldn't happen because there is too much liberalization and common sense probably prevails a little bit too much. But to be honest, it's one of the best things about living in Southeast Asia is that common sense prevails. It's hard to explain, but I'm going to do my best to explain what it's like over here. So in Australia, there's so many rules and regulations in regards to food, and they are there for a reason. Like the last thing you need is mass E. coli outbreaks and things like that. But it can go too far one way, and ultimately it stifles creativity and imagination. Now, I'm going to see if I can do this for a second. I don't know if my camera's going to allow me, but let's have a look down here, right? So I don't know if you can see it down there, but just down there, there's a couple of food stalls. Okay, just where is it over there? A couple of food stalls. Now, those food stalls literally popped up, 3 weeks ago. And it started with one of them. And that one of them was selling coffee. And then next to it popped up a place that was selling pastries. And next to that was a place that was selling orange juices and juices. Yeah, look, are they following the rules and regulations in regards to food? I'm tipping they're not. But is it way more convenient for everyone in this area now that there's a coffee shop that's just appeared? Hell yeah. There was a demand for coffee around here, and some entrepreneurial person decided to take advantage of that and open up a coffee shop. And because of that, there's a whole ecosystem that's popped up around it that's made this whole area better. Another example is playgrounds. So in Australia, the days of the old metal playgrounds, they're gone. And, to be honest, there's probably a reason for that. Those things were little death traps. Have they gone in a full-blown the other direction with red tape? Probably. Over here, the playgrounds are a lot simpler. And because they're a lot simpler, it forces kids to use their imaginations more, and it forces kids to use common sense. So from a very young age, the kids here are taught common sense, and they're taught that actually, is it safe to go and jump between there and there? And Of course, kids will be kids and kids will hurt themselves and kids will get injured. But if they're getting taught common sense from a very young age, it means they're going to carry common sense to when they get older. And I feel like that's something that's missing in Australia, is we have a whole generation of kids that are just not being taught common sense through the world around them. And because of that, we're starting to see the flow-on effects of that now with the woke generation, and we're starting to see the flow-on effects now of people who rely too much on their government to make decisions for them. Here in Malaysia, the people need the government. Obviously, you need roads, you need healthcare, but the people live and exist without suckling on the teat of the government. And it's because they've all been taught common sense and they've all been taught that they need to look after themselves. And I like the idea that if you have common sense, you don't need to be overgoverned. Whereas in Australia just assumes no one has common sense and we all need to be overgoverned. And honestly, that's a little bit sad that Australia's moved that way, and it's definitely one of the things I don't miss. I don't miss being overgoverned. I don't miss being told what I can and can't do with every single action in my life in Australia. Oh, you can't do that because some bylaw said you can't do that. You can't do that because what do your neighbors think? You can't do that because of X, Y, Z. You can't swim there because there could be, you can't swim there because there's seaweed or whatever. I don't like that. Whereas here, it's like, look, you can swim where the seaweed is. We don't need to put a sign there to say you can't do that. But common sense would say, don't swim where the seaweed is because you're not going to have a good experience. Now, obviously, like I said, rules and regulations are designed to protect people. But I think in Australia, the government doesn't give people enough credit for having common sense. But, look, it is what it is. And that's why we voted with our feet and that's why we decided to leave. But yeah, I just thought it was an interesting concept to talk about because obviously she brought it up and I was like, that's actually a really good point. It's part of the reason I left too, because I really enjoy the fact that if I have the common sense, no one's going to tell me what I can and can't do. As long as it's common sense and as long as it's not hurting anyone else, they're fine with it. As soon as you start hurting other people around you, that's when the government cracks down and they stomp on you with an iron boot. But until then, you're left to your own devices and you're left to just do your own thing, which I really, really like. So guys, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you found this one interesting. But like I said, share in the comments, what's some bit of bureaucracy, red tape in Australia that you really don't like, that would make you want to leave? Leave it in the comments and maybe we'll cover it off in the next video. But guys, thanks so much for watching and I'll catch you in the next video.